Hi everybody. Thanks for joining us late on this. Well, it's a sunny Sunday evening here in down on the south coast, isn't it? Are you on the south coast at the moment, Jack?
I am, yes. Probably no doubt not far from you.
Probably just down the road. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us at the end of this fabulous day that UK Crime Book Club have put on. I'm Graham Bartlett, and for the next hour, it's my absolute privilege to be nattering with all of you listening to us to the amazing Jack Jordan, who I've wanted to share a platform with for a long time. And when Sam suggested it, I thought, yes. So, Jack, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
So, Jack and I, we know. I suppose we know each other because we're both crime writers, but we also live near. Well, I live near Brighton. Are you near Brighton or in Brighton?
I'm in Central Hove, so and quite close to the sea. So yeah, lovely spot.
You'll always find people that live in Hove will always tell you they live in Hove.
Hove, actually. Hashtag Hove, actually.
I live in Hove, actually. And Jack, Jack's an amazing. I love Jack's books. The two most recent ones, Do No Harm and Conviction, just absolutely blew me away. And they've done rather well, haven't they, Jack? I think.
Yeah, they're doing well. Yeah. It's always a relief to be able to say that. I think it's for me. I've had a journey that's been up and down and all over the place. So I've had highs, I've had lows, and at the moment I'm riding the most beautiful high. So savoring every second. So I've done. I'm writing my 8th book at the moment, and you've done 3 so far.
I've done 2 non-fictions, 2 fictions, and I've got my 3rd coming out.
I've missed one. Right. Okay. I need to go and do some book shopping.
I can subtly hint.
I love it. Yeah.
You say about ups and downs. I think actually before we met, I heard on a podcast, I think it was Blood Brothers podcast, you talking quite honestly and openly about the ups and downs you've had in your writing career. And I still regard myself as a very new writer. And it was quite empowering listening to what you've been through and the strength that you've had to come through that. And you know, you talked about sort of anxiety and that sort of thing, but very openly. Is that something you're keen to get across to other writers that you?
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to writing, I think the majority of writers feel this way. I think we work so hard before we're published to get published. I mean, for me, I was writing. I wrote for 5 years before I first published. So that was 5 years of rejections and working hard and every year and keep going and keep going. And then when I got published, I thought, this is it. And at first it was fantastic. I self-published 2 of my own books at first and sold really well. And then I got into traditional publishing that way. And then I had a rocky road. I thought, oh, I've made it now. And actually, I think it becomes as quite a shock to every author, or the majority of us, where we think we've made it when we get in, but actually the hard work's only just beginning. We think we've done all we have to get there, but actually it's just a second leg of the journey. It's a very long marathon. And then when you have success, you're desperate to keep it. So I think uncertainty in this job is very normal, it's the norm. And I think talking openly and honestly about it, it makes people feel like it's not just them.
And I mean, I'm at that stage where I had a different publisher for non-fictions because that's why I co-wrote them with another author. But I'm with my first, and I don't know whether it would be my only publisher, my first publisher with the other ones. But it is this kind of, when I talk to more experienced authors like you, it is this kind of transition from one publisher to another, and different series and different genre or subgenre. And you've really got to keep moving, haven't you?
Totally, I think so. Do you want me to tell my kind of publishing story for context?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I started writing at the age of 17. I had agoraphobia and I was stuck in the house for a year. And I'd always loved reading and writing, but it never seemed like it was something that I could pursue. I don't know whether it was my working class background or how we as society see creative pursuits, but I never saw my love of reading and writing as a child and in school as a career opportunity. But when I was locked away in the house for a year, I had to pass the time. And I did that by writing a short story on my BlackBerry very early one morning, about 5 a.m., just to get this idea out of my head because I didn't know what to do with it. And then the next day I thought, oh, I'll add a little bit more. And the day after that, I'll add a little bit more. And then 6 months later, I'd written a 100,000 words novel. And when I'd written the end, that's when I gave myself permission to kind of follow that dream. And then I tried for 5 years I wrote 4 novels, submitting to agents, trying to get in the traditional route. And it just, like every author, lots of rejections. But then in 2015, there was a self-publishing boom going on. Like Rachel Abbott had exploded and created this like empire for herself. It was phenomenal to watch. And so I thought, okay, well, the door to publishing is closed. I'll find a window. And that's when I got into self-publishing and self-published my first 2 books and sold 100,000 copies, which was, it was kind of like a business military operation in terms of I very much treated it like a brand. And that was my way in to get an agent, to get a publisher. And that's meant to be the happy ending, but actually it was a new journey I had to follow. So I published 3 more books. And unfortunately, after 10 years in the industry, I had one book that didn't sell as well as others had. And I found myself after 10 years of writing, so working myself out agoraphobia, writing, self-publishing, and then being traditionally published, without an agent and without a publisher. I was back to square one. And then this was at the end of 2019. And I was essentially told, you're not going to get this kind of, you're not going to be a lead title anymore. You're not going to be this. You're not going to be that. It's not going to be possible. I'm the type of person where when someone says you can't do something, I want to prove them wrong. And I thought, well, I'll have to prove them wrong then. And I will have to deliver a book that people can't say no to. They can look past this one book that didn't sell as well and publish with enthusiasm. And that's when I came up with Do No Harm. And I wrote that at the start of 2020, when lo and behold, we were all locked away in our houses. It was this very unique, cyclical moment where I was back in my house, back at square one. I thought, well, after 10 years, I'll just have to do it all over again. And now, luckily, I've been on this journey of just absolute every dream coming true in quick succession. So I think that's why I'd like to be honest about that, because every career is going to have ups and downs. I'm sure to have more downs in the future as well as ups. And I think it's important that we're open about that, so then everyone can, not feel so isolated about it.
I mean, thanks so much, Sharon. That's such an incredible story, and there'll be aspiring writers listening to this. There'll be people that are partway through that journey, and it's that kind of inner self-belief that sounds like it kept you going, and that if someone tells me I can't do something, I want to prove that I can, and that's really pushed you through. And thank goodness you did, because I mean, Do No Harm is just it's the only, well, not the only book. It's the first book I've read of yours. I've read Conviction this year as well, but Do No Harm, and I remember picking it up and just thinking, Brighton author, I'll give it a go, and just, oh my God, one, you must hate your protagonists because you put them through such dreadful turmoil. I mean, poor Anna Jones, there she is, going about her day, as we all do, doing heart surgery, and then all of a sudden she's got this, you need to kill this person or your son will die. And it's, I'm not going to sort of give any spoilers or anything like that, but Conviction's the same with Neve Harper. You need to throw this case. Do you hate your protagonists, or do you just think of the worst possible moral dilemma these kind of pillars of their own professions might come up against and try and dig them out of it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the latter. Do you know what? It's so funny because I actually love my characters, and I never strive to write unlikable characters. That we hear that quite a lot, don't we? Especially about female characters. That's usually the label they're given. If they're not perfect, they're unlikable. Which I'm always like, so when I write them, I write what I believe to be flawed real people, because we're all flawed. And I think what I love about first person narrative when writing is that we get to see inside the character's head, hear their inner thoughts that no one's supposed to hear. We're getting a window into their fears, their unfiltered thoughts and expressions. So we get to see their fight or flight in action, in real time, in this terrible predicament. And I think that's why I love the moral dilemma and making it really difficult, because then we get to see who the character really is. I think, and it's, well, I mean, because when we're all, I think we all have a perception of who we think we are and the perception we give the world and people in our lives. But when we go through stress, when we go through tough things, that's when we kind of really get to know who we are, the deep center of who we are. And that's what I like to explore in my characters. So I have to put them through hell and give them an impossible choice to really reveal who they are to the reader. But maybe I am evil, because I might save them, I might not.
You hide it very well in real life, but I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's, you know, it's twistier than a curly-whirly too. Your books are twistier than curly-whirly. I mean, I remember just like, oh my god, I didn't see that. Oh, I didn't see that coming. Oh my god! You pull the rug all the time. You're a very, very clever, talented writer, and you deserve every success.
Oh, thank you. What I mean, I'm just moving because I've got the sun in my face a little bit. Probably look like I'm chatting to a ghost. You're chatting to a ghost. There we are. That's better. I mean, I write standalones, so I think when I write a new book, I kind of try and approach. I almost have a clean slate, and I can start again. I can be evil to my characters all over again. You have the pressure of writing a series with a continuing character. How do you find writing a series? Was that what you always wanted to do? Is that what you want to continue doing? And is there extra pressures to writing a series and having to remember everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Joe Howe series, it was always in my mind that it would be a series. Whether anyone wanted to buy a series or not was another thing to worry about later on. But I always wanted to evolve my characters over more than one book, and not just the protagonist, but other characters as well. The plus side is that you only have to reinvent the world. You only have to invent the world once. You don't have to invent a world every standalone. But the downside is that consistency. You say about how do you remember everything, and you know I've sort of some really good people that read my stuff before it goes anywhere near my agent, and Sam Brownlee is one of those, and my son who completely debunks the myth about family being kind to you in editing. But they will sort of say, well, actually, didn't this happen in Bad for Good? Or, oh God, yeah, you know, it's usually little details. But it's, you know, the other thing is how, because you try and sort of load the pressure on more and more and more in each book, and make each book able to be read as a standalone, but also, you know, people, you know, you want people to read them through as well. So it's kind of, it's developing that almost like sort of dual arcs, really. You've got a series arc, and then you've got you've got the book arcs as well, and making sure they all work together, but also trying to make life, for my case, Joe Howe, even worse every time. You open a book, and you know, I think I've managed to achieve that. But I think I would probably because I'm used to writing series now. I think I probably prefer that than writing standalones. But I would like to have a go like you do, you know, and other brilliant authors where you just kind of invent this world every time. And you know, you can sort of create something new each time. Have you ever thought about writing or any of your book series? I'm sorry, I've not read it.
No, so I write standalones, and purely because I would forget, and then I would shoot myself in the foot. I think I would have the anxiety I'd have about having to remember what happened 3 books ago. I think I haven't got the bravery that series writers do, but I do have a very poor memory. So I think, I think. With going back to kind of, I put my characters through hell. I think if I continued, so if I wrote about Dr. Anna Jones again, if I wrote about Neve Harper again, and you never know, I think I do like to leave things open, so just in case I ever wanted to. But I think I would be labelled as a sadist if I did, because like going back and just destroying their lives over and over. I think I think there's a particular skill with series writers where they put the character through enough hell, and they've got the backstory that's going to lend to their character growth, but also they have this glimmer of hope that's going to carry through each time.
Mm.
And we still see them growing and growing. And I think that's something so beautiful as a reader to have with a series, as you grow with the characters.
Mm.
I mean, so we're talking about the series as well. The series is based in Sussex. So do you have, and that's where you're based, is there extra pressure to write about where the streets you walk and write about where people are going to know? Do you have to be very vigilant on street names and time of day and when that shop's open that everyone loves? And does that add extra pressure to keep people happy? Because I'm often known to create a place so I can avoid that.
Yeah. No, it does. No, it does. But and because of the job I used to do, and if you want to know, if you want to know directions, ask a policeman. They expect you to know every kind of alleyway and as you say, every little shop and their opening times, etc. So yeah, no, it does create a pressure, but also as a new writer, when I was writing Bad for Good, it created a different kind of pressure, because I felt like if I was like, there's a scene where Joe Howe is called to a murder, and it's actually Phil Cook's son who's been murdered, and because she lived in one part of Brighton and I wanted to move her to another part of Brighton, I had some sort of inner narrative as she was driving around the back streets of Withdean, which is one of the neighbourhoods in Brighton, to this place, and I just thought, does anyone care? They just want to get her to the scene. They don't really want to know all this. So sometimes you can know too much about a place, I'm writing something at the moment where I've invented a whole kind of region of the UK, not sort of geographically, but none of it really exists, and I am feeling some freedom there, and I'm bringing in elements of towns and cities that I know, just so when I'm writing moving scenes, I can just sort of picture it myself.
Yeah, and I mean that's such an interesting thing to touch on as well, because I think the pressure of a writer when we're writing, I think the pressure we put on ourselves is probably the biggest pressure of all. I think, how do you deal with kind of imposter syndrome? How do you, or with the self pressure to keep delivering? How do you do that with each new book?
I don't think I do deal with imposter syndrome very well at all. I mean, I came into writing very late. I just retired from the police and had a fabulous opportunity to write some non-fictions with a very successful author, and then just continued writing. So I've always got this feeling that I'm going to be found out, or I've only got kind of 2 stories in me, or whatever it is. And I just have to, the validation is when it goes to people like Sam or goes to my agent or publisher. But I just have to kind of write through it, really. Try just kind of just have that belief that I'm going to write this. This is going to be the best thing I've ever written. And I also I also kind of have a style now where I literally don't care on my first draft. I literally don't care about the quality of my writing or anything. And I've heard many writers talk about this, but my first draft is telling myself a story. So once I know what my story is, then I can go back and kind of beef it up and hide things here and twist things there and such. So that first draft is the bit where why am I being so hard on myself? I don't know what the story is yet. And it was actually Dorothy Coomson that helped me with that. Well, what about you? Do you suffer from that? Do you suffer from?
Yeah, definitely. And I think every writer does. And if they don't, then they probably should, because I think it's actually good for us in a way. It keeps us on our toes. It keeps us wanting to deliver the best we can. And it keeps us humble as well, which I think is exceptionally important. No one wants to read about a writer who thinks they're the best in the world. I think I think in terms of, I think every writer, I think because the job we're in is very insular. We spend the time on our own in our own little worlds, and then at one point, and then the other point is we're with loads of people. It's one juxtaposition to another. So when you spend a lot of time on your own, the person you're listening to and talking to the most is yourself. And we all know what the insides of our skulls are like. We're always going to say we're going to put ourselves down. It's just human nature. So I think when working on something creative, and also working in a field where it's very difficult to get in, so there's an element of luck, feeling if we're worthy of that. I think we all are very guilty of it. I think but a little bit of hope on the side of that, though. I think when it comes to writing, I feel pressure. And in turn, I try and my view of writing is the same as yours, in that the first draft is for me and I need to just get the words down. I could still be kind to myself in that process, because I still expect it to be perfect, even though that's not going to be the case. So it's still like pulling teeth sometimes. But I think, yeah, being kind to yourself, and also the more books you do, your writing style is automatic. We don't have to, we're not finding it, it's already been found. So I think that's an element of ease there. So we can kind of, when we're writing, we think at the time it's crap, but actually when you look back, it's more elevated than it would have been 3-4 books ago. So I think over time it gets better. But the hope element is, I love the business side of publishing as well as the writing side. I think there's like the yin and yang of my personality. And in business, I don't have imposter syndrome. I actually feel really at home in that seat. I don't mind asking questions. I don't mind being direct. I don't mind having a vision and being ambitious. So I think that's where I have confidence. And then in writing, I think the confidence grows. And sometimes it's when the book's done, I'm like, oh, this book's awful, everyone's going to hate it. And it comes out, I think, actually, that might be my best one. But it only takes a year for me to come to that conclusion. So I think it's a unique journey that we all are hard on ourselves. But I think hopefully over time, it just gets a bit easier.
So when you talk about the business side of it, then are you talking about when you're dealing with your agent and your publishers, and that's when you kind of click into that sort of hard edge visit? Is that the work? Is that when you're
talking? I think so. I mean, I love when it comes to business, I love the idea of branding. I love the idea of how we're going to grow that. Looking at different areas, how are we going to grow that? How are we going to invest in that? With my last book, I ended up coming up with a 15-page business plan just to share where I thought I might be. This is what I'm thinking that could happen in the next 2 to 3 years. This is what I would like to see. And that's not to say that I expect everything on the list to be done, but I think it's with publishing, I think, and with authors as well, I think it can be it's a bit of a trap that we're so grateful that we just say yes to everything and accept it as it is. And I think the longer we go, I think our expectations and our ambitions are important. And I think it's important to have that heard. I think it's also, there's definitely a way of doing it. I think there's definitely there's compromise even in terms of our expectations and things. But I think going in with a vision is no bad thing, and expectations. And then I think it's important if you lay out on the table what you want, they know what the expectations are. And you can have a conversation if that is something that's going to be happening, if it's not, and if it's not, why. And then, I think it's important. I'm very open in that. And I'm very lucky that I've got a phenomenal team where our ambition matches. I've also had previous publishers where it didn't match. So I think I think I love that part of it. I think it's just, I think sometimes business can come naturally to people and a love of it, and some people just prefer the creative side. I think it's a bit of a mixture. But I think I love working with my team and talking to them and planning ahead and things like that.
I think that's really interesting that you keep that I don't want to use the word agent as in agent, but you keep that agency in your own work, in your own brand by kind of being at the table as an equal with them. And so many writers, and I put myself in this, you touched on it, we were sort of almost just too grateful to be published or to be represented. You just think, whatever you think. But actually, we're the ones that are creating the product that other people are going to hopefully earn some money out of. So therefore, we should be the ones who certainly equal partners around the table. It's really interesting. Is that from your self-publishing world? Is that where you developed that, or is that something that you from your past?
I think self-publishing definitely gave me a lot of knowledge. So I would say knowledge is power. So I go into, I know what works and what doesn't, or from my experience. Like, there are also things I don't know and I love to learn and I want to know. So I also ask a lot of questions. When I self-published, I treated those first 2 books as my own business. So I did market research in terms of how do the big publishers market their own books and brand their own books, and how can I do that? I got a loan from the bank because I didn't have the money, but I got a loan from the bank and invested in it like a business, and tried to emulate what big publishers were doing for their authors on a scale that I could afford. I think I've had a business approach from the get-go, and I think, and then going into publishing, in traditional publishing, I kind of had a bit of a step up, because I knew a lot of what the conversation. I didn't have to be explained much. Not much had to be explained. If anything, I would ask questions, and yeah, it would kind of, the knowledge was there, which was a bit of a power play, which was really interesting. But yeah, no, I think it's a trap that we all do fall into, or a lot of us fall into, where we're just grateful for the opportunity, and that can be wholly true. But I think it's important for us to. I like to think that in life, in not just in publishing, but in life, the only person who's going to solely give you what you deserve and give you a voice to ask what you deserve is yourself. I think, and that's going to happen in business, it's going to happen in relationships, it's going to happen in friendships, it's going to happen in all sorts of things. I think we have to be our own champions. And I think, yeah, and knowing our worth and knowing what we want and knowing our passion, I think it's a really important thing to have. So yeah, I'm a big champion of that empowerment to bring yourself to the table, as it were.
And I know, because we mix in some of the same circles. I know that you're very generous with that kind of advice with a lot of authors. I don't know what the conversation was about, but a mutual friend of ours, Jo Furness, said to me once that she was in one of those kind of internal crises that we all go through, and she picked the phone up to you, and you sort of said, right, coffee, half an hour or something like that, and you were there, and you were very generous with your time and your listening ear, and is that important to you as well? Do you presumably you have people you go to as well? Is that, we talked about lonely profession, but is that important for you to kind of have that network of people that you can just go, I need some help, or to be the person that others come to because they know you're a kind person?
Oh, thank you, Graham. I think it's community in terms of writing is so important because it is such an isolating profession. I think, I've got the trifecta. I'm single and I live alone and I work alone. So that's a lot. So I have to be quite proactive. And so, I remember when my career at one point finished, or so it looked like, I reached out to two authors. I'll name them because they're lovely, Holly Seddon and John Mars. I reached out to them and just asked for their advice on certain situations. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from Holly. And she said, lick your wounds for a month and then get back up and prove them wrong. And it's just, and then another piece of advice that my friend gave me, my best friend since we were 5, I went to her and I wanted to jack it all in. I thought, oh, this is too hard. It's been 10 years. Everything's fallen apart. She said, but you don't know what's around the corner. And what was around the corner was every dream I ever wanted. So I think going through that experience myself, I want to be that person who I went to. I want to be that person for someone else, I think, because also publishing is a bit of cloak and daggers. We don't cloak and mirrors even. We don't really know. You don't really learn so much about what happens at other publishers or with other authors unless you talk to them, unless you have open and honest conversations with each other. And I think that transparency is really important. I think and also in terms of advance, there's no site that says what everyone's getting paid. I think, are we getting our worth? I think, if you're open about that with people, you can talk about that. And so you can look at your own camp and think, is this where I'm meant to be going? I think transparency and friendship and camaraderie is so important. And also just having a laugh as well and just moaning, we've got an edit and we're pulling our hair out. We go, oh my God, I had that with the last one. Just that. Yeah, that camaraderie is so important. We're so lucky in Sussex because there are so many authors here. I see authors, I think probably every day walking around. Where I live, Juno Dawson works across the street, so where she writes. So it's we're all very in close proximity to each other. So we have that nice connection. So how would you say community in terms of the writing community and publishing community and reader community helps you in your job and like the isolation part of it?
Yeah, it's an incredibly warm community, and I would have thought something that is reasonably competitive, like people will only have a certain number of pounds to spend on books, so therefore surely we must all be in competition with each other, to be the person who wrote the book that they decide to pick up. But it's not like that at all, is it? It really isn't. And I found I found, in Sussex and elsewhere. I mean, I advise a lot of authors as well, and I'm lucky to advise, some authors that have been through the mill a few times, like you have, and they're very generous with their advice. I found people are, will move head over heels to give you the support without being preachy. I mean, I remember you talk about rejections. I remember when Bad for Good was out on submission, I started getting the rejection letters or emails through from my agent, and you go like, "Oh, sorry, Graham, another one," and I was feeling a bit, "Oh, this is obviously crap." No one's, who was I kidding, sort of thing. And then Victoria Selman just WhatsApped me about something, and we've met each other. I'd advised on a couple of things, and we've met. And I said, I'm just getting bloom rejection after rejection. She said, "Right, phone me now." So I phoned her, and she said, "Right." She said, "Has no one explained this to you?" I said, "Well, my agent, David's explained a bit about what, where you go." Right. What you've got to understand is that when you go, I said, "How long have you been out on submission?" I said, about 4 or 5 days. She said, "Right, you always get rejections because that's the first filter. And if you're going to get signed, it's got to go through several different filters." She said, "Everybody gets rejections. You know that, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I do know that." She said, "The best books in the world get rejections. You do know that, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I do know that." And it was like, yes. But it was so powerful just to hear from somebody who was, I don't know what she was doing at the time, but she was like, "Phone me now," because she probably felt the pain that I was going through, and just kind of just made everything make sense to me.
Yeah.
I remember also last year at Capital Crime, with the setup, it was easy just to kind of wander in and out of panels, and I found it really inspiring because there were some of the world's most famous authors there talking about the fear of rejection, the loneliness of the writing process, imposter syndrome, and just listening to that, not sort of reveling in it at all, but it's like, oh, that's just part of the territory then. That's I'm a writer, so that's kind of I used to be in the police, and nights and dealing with horrible people sometimes was part of the territory, and I just accepted that, because that was the world I went into. And now I'm sort of starting to learn that all these other things are part of my new territory, my new career.
Definitely. And I think one thing I love, and I actually only learned this year, in terms of, I love Instagram inspirational reels. When you get stuck in one algorithm and you're stuck forever. And one of them is, I like inspirational speakers talking about certain things, and you see clips. And one of them really stuck with me. And she said, and I'm ad-libbing, she said it much better than I'm about to say, but how, if everything were perfect, if every duck was in a row, would you be happy? And the answer would probably be no, because we'd be bored, because we need, as human beings, we need challenge, we need adversity, we need hurdles to jump over. It gives us momentum. And I think writing attracts and publishing attracts a certain personality in terms of, when we get rejection, it actually fuels us to go for that acceptance. And I think, so if writing came without the rejection, I actually wonder if our work would be as good. If I think there's always, I think, a silver lining to everything. And Victoria was totally right about how rejections come first. And also, I mean, Donna's said, it doesn't bloody help though, does it? Being on submission is hell. I hate being on submission. I hate it. When Do No Harm was out on submission, I mean, there was a lot of pressure, but I spent 2 weeks, and it went on for like 2.5 weeks. And it was September, but I lost my mind a little bit, and I was baking Christmas cookies, gingerbread cupcakes, all the Halloween cookies, really themed, out of season, baked good. I lost my mind because all you can do is refresh your email and hope and hope and hope. Because I think the one thing that we all need the most in this industry and profession is resilience. But yeah, it can be pretty exhausting. So going back to the writing, what I love about your Joe Howe series is how it's, so even though you've got the continuing characters, you still have a fresh slate in terms of in each new case. And when you do, so like with book 1, you've got, vigilantism and things like that. And book 2, you've got a far right villain. When you write your books, is it important for you to write about a topic that is usually topical, and share that in terms? So is it important for you to write a story that's based in current events and to share a take on that?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of crime that I decided from the outset that I wanted to write would be sort of police procedural, but it's about how big political or social issues impact on policing. So always each one needed to have a big theme that people would recognise. So the first one is vigilantism, but it's more about the impact of police cuts. The second one, as you say, is about when a right wing, well, neo-Nazi really, it's not right wing, a neo-Nazi council takes over a hitherto left-leaning city, and what happens when they fuel it with with slaves and human trafficking for terrorism. And the third one, which is out next year, and thanks Sarah Blackburn for reminding me to say that, because she's put it a couple of times on there and I'm terrible at remembering. Out in March, called City on Fire. It's about how big pharmaceutical companies try to sustain heroin epidemics so as to sustain their profits, and the impact on the people that are trying to do the opposite. And there's so many people dying. It's just horrible. But yeah, so it's always try and get a big theme, and then funnel it down into some sort of proper street level crime, so you can sort of see, because that was my world. My world was my last few years. I wasn't a murder detective in those years. I've moved on from that. But I was having to battle the politics of a city of Brighton and Hove and deliver an effective policing service with my teams at the same time. And it was so I want to show the battle that Joe has in that. So yeah, for me, it's important to show a broader context than just kind of say a lockroom murder or something like that. I want to show where some of that stuff comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. So I think it's so clear as you're talking and in your work how there's what's right and what's wrong and the consequences of each in society. And I think that bigger picture, I think that's so important. And that's kind of how I think, and you can definitely see your work in that and see where you kind of come from as a person and wanting to do good, which is such a wonderful thing to see. And then, so yeah, kind of with moral dilemmas, so you kind of do the outset and how it can affect a lot of people. With moral dilemmas, I kind of bake in a person's right and wrong and put it to the test within them and see if they're going to explode. So I'm more evil than you. I think you've got this beautiful view of hope and how we can do good, and I'm just evil.
We have that as my I was going to say Twitter, my Twitter profile, Jack.
I'm still saying Twitter.
But I think you're right, because your characters, Anna and Neve, they can't tell anyone, can they? They can't. They have to. They just have to be that pressure cooker of this dreadful thing that they've been told to do, or something more dreadful is going to happen. And the way that the way that they kind of deal with it, and I think that first person point of view is so important, because you've got that kind of you're just feeling it with them, you're just feeling that pain. But also there, I mean, as I say, I advise people on policing. You must do an awful lot of research, because I wouldn't know what goes on in an operating theatre when someone's having heart surgery. And whilst I know a little bit about the criminal bar and how courts work, I don't know the level of detail that you put in. So do you use experts in that way, or?
I haven't yet.
Stop it.
I think for me, research is an integral part of the story building. I think for me to feel confident in what I'm going to write about, I need to know as much as possible. So I start with the research.
Yeah.
So with Do No Harm and about heart surgery, I read a lot of the university textbooks, which are so expensive. I cried every time I bought one. And then there was another manual where basically junior doctors run around with. So if they need an answer, they can get it. They flip through this book. I watched Open Heart Surgery on YouTube. But also what I found really integral was reading autobiographies by heart surgeons or by surgeons in general to understand who they are when they take the coat off, when they're not in the operating theatre, understand the pressures on them, not just the task they're doing, and how they're equipped to do that, their personality type, to be able to switch off emotions and things to kind of take away the view of a person on a table and see a job to complete. I think I found it fascinating. So I think I choose an area that I'm fascinated about, and then I will research it because I'm fascinated. And then with conviction, I was lucky that I'd done a lot of research for a book that didn't get published actually, but in UK law. So again, that was a lot of autobiographies, a lot of textbooks, a lot of Googling, and also just reading a lot in that subgenre. And just a lot. I think that becomes a pressure in itself. And I think, and this is a question I'd love to ask you, because this is something that I feel pressure with, is timing. I think a book a year authors are under a lot of pressure to deliver, especially hardback to paperback. So we have 2 publications in a year, so lots to do. We have to deliver each year with that, not only internal pressure of imposter syndrome and am I good enough and these things, but also expectations from publishers and readers, and the shorter time frame to do it. So so the reason why I went on to that is because with research, I have time to leisurely do it in my own pace. Now I kind of feel like I'm researching with a gun to my head because I've got to write it. So it's sped up my process. So how have you found that transition from writing at your pace to get published to now writing to meet the demand?
Yeah, I mean, that's such an interesting question, because Bad for Good took me 7 years to write. And it wasn't public. It wasn't even, I didn't even think it was ever going to sort of end up on paper, let alone in bookshops. I wrote my non-fiction. I was writing my non-fiction as well doing. So absolutely, I whilst it was policing, there was still a lot of research I had to do. I was trying to find my writing style, and when you find that, you find that. But the other 2 books, I mean, A Force of Hate took just under a year to write, and there was a lot of research in that. There was really sort of was a huge amount for me to do, and City on Fire it's taken even less than that because of the contractual timeline. So it is really, really, really tricky to balance that, and not to get too sort of too lost down rabbit holes either. I just kind of think, how much do I need to know? How much can I get away with, really? Because when I'm talking to other authors, I say, you'll learn an awful lot from me about policing, but only include on the page what really drives your story and your characters forward. Anything else is just showing off that you know it. So I try and research in that review. I'm just like, okay, I need to go below the surface so I can show the tip of the iceberg. I don't need to go right down to the sea floor. I don't need to know, everything there is to know about, how a rogue right-wing council will manage to get themselves elected in a left-leaning city and all the electoral commission stuff around it. That's a line in the book, so I don't need to know all that. But I do have to have enough to know that what I'm writing is credible. So what's your? I'm going to ask you. Can you tell us what your next book is?
Yeah, and I'm sure I can. Yeah, so no, I'm writing a book called Redemption at the moment, and it's another moral dilemma thriller, but it's kind of a fresh take on it for me. It's about a husband and wife who are going on a road trip to avenge the death of their son. So the man who killed him in a hit and run has now been released from prison, and they don't believe that it's a worthy punishment. So they're going to complete the deed of punishment themselves. But the moral dilemma aspect of it is actually it's the mother who is hell-bent on revenge, and her partner knows that if she goes through with this, he will lose her forever. So he actually has to protect the man who killed their son in order to protect his wife from herself. So it's definitely it's a cat and mouse thriller. And it's based in the US. They're British characters, but based in the US. So lots of new ground. And an emotional depth that I haven't gone to in a while in terms of my books and things. So it's been really exciting. But yeah, I think, doing it very fast.
I mean, we all want to buy that now. We all need, I don't think you write fast enough, Jack. And I want that on my doormat tomorrow morning.
Well, it will only be the first draft, so you won't enjoy it. You have to wait until it's better.
That sounds incredible. And you just, and the thing is, all of these, all your moral dilemmas, you just think, yeah, actually that could happen. That that could happen. There could be this kind of this split loyalty for the father, and having to protect somebody that obviously ripped his heart out years ago in order to keep the woman that he wants to. It's just, that's incredible. You're so clever.
Oh, thank you. And I think
listen to show of hands. He's clever. Should we take some questions? There's a few questions in the side here.
Yeah, no, I'd love to.
Alex Hawley's says, I'd love to know your opinions on switching genre. I'm trying to write books that cover a lot of different areas. Thoughts on that, Jack? Which means that I need time to think, so I'll send it over to you.
So, what's how to be? Is that the one about writing fictional and non-fictional, or is there one about?
Hi guys, as a new writer, I'd love to know your opinions on.
Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. There's for me when I think of the stories I write and things, I think about it from a business point of view, and because publishing is it's essentially, so publishing is a business, so they're going to want to. So if someone buys a certain genre from you, they want to build you in that genre. It's gone be the day when someone like Margaret Atwood and things can just one day write historical, the next write fantasy. It's become quite shoehorned. So I will be writing moral dilemmas until the day I die. I think there's definitely a business element to it. I think so. If you want to write outside of, if you want to write in different genres, I think have a clear distinction between your work. So have your one genre that, so if you're writing in crime, you have your crime genre and your readers there, and then you have your fantasy genre, things like, I think keep them separate, even if under different names if you want to, but I think, and allow the two to have the same consistency. I think having that distinctions and longevity with each path you take is important if you want to go be a career author in terms of the continuation. But also as a creative, I would love to hop around. I think it's because ultimately being creative is about being free, isn't it? You want to explore and create. And then the business side of it is quite constricting. So I think it's trying to find a balance between the two. That's what I do anyway. But lots of authors do it where they write under one name in one genre and do it in another. And I think that's phenomenal. But I think they go about it with a clear distinction of their avenues of where they want to go in terms of growth.
Yeah, I think publishers prefer that because it creates more clarity in readers' minds, doesn't it? If you're not, if the next Jack Jordan isn't a YA book or a fantasy or something like that, you're keeping that consistency in the genre under that name.
Yeah, if I said to my publisher I want to publish in a different genre, they say no. So I wouldn't be allowed. But I think, so I think, but I think allowing yourself to be creatively free as well. So if you're not contractually obligated and you're finding your voice and you're finding out which genres are perfect for you, I think explore everything you possibly can. But I think once you're kind of on the road of building, I think if you want to continue building in one genre, I think stick to it and invest in it and your time in it, because being creative is very draining. I think it's important to keep your stamina in one area to keep that growth going. But that's my business head talking. So I'm going to put the creative hat back on now and say, create whatever you want.
That's right. I hope that was helpful, Alex. That certainly was to me. It's so interesting listening to you talking with both hats on, Jack, because several people in here have talked about inspiring and how inspiring you are, and I think it's inspiring to know you can be a great creative and also be businesslike about it. I've just got to say a couple of people. There's one it just says Facebook user, but I'm going to say it. Graham, you've been invaluable help with my police procedural scenes. Plug there, and Alison as well. That says thank you very much. Very kind, Alison, to say that I was helpful to you as well. And I think that I use advisors all the time, for my own work, and you've got to know where your knowledge gaps are and work out how to fill them in an efficient way without really sort of let's say getting lost down rabbit holes.
And I would also say on that, because I think I haven't used them yet, but I think there's a likelihood I'll have to adapt conviction to a US setting. And knowing about US law and knowing about that jurisdiction is going to be very new, and I won't have the time to turn it around. So I'll definitely be seeking out an advisor in that. Also, because I think in terms of the business side of it, I think I come from a working class background, so I'm usually quite frugal. If I can do something myself, but even if it takes 10 times longer, that was usually my format. But I think it's important. I think it's really powerful to see not things like that, not as an expense, but as an investment in your book, in your work, in your future, because also you'll be taught things that you never knew in half the time. So yeah, I can't wait to find someone for help for me next year.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to your business brain as well. If you're spending sparse money because you just, well, this would be interesting, that's not great business. But actually, if you're thinking, no, if I want to sell this in the US, I need to invest the money so that I'll get a return from the US market. And it's that's that juxtaposition of creative and business that you've been so helpful with. So I'm just going to
I would love to, Sarah. I would love to be in Catch Me If You Can. If they do a reboot, I'm in. Sarah said, "I thought you could be like the actor in Catch Me If You Can with all your research for the jobs you've written about in your books." Yeah. I would love it.
There we go.
Watch out, Leo.
How long does it take to find your writing style?
Very good question. Do you want me to go first?
If you like, yeah. My answer is I'm not sure I have yet. But
no, I think writing at first there's more challenging because you don't know what your voice is yet. I think once you do, it becomes a little bit easier in that regard. So for anyone who's in that struggle at the moment, it does get easier because it's kind of baked in. So what I like to do, and this is a trick that I do to kind of get into the zone of writing prose, is I have physical books next to me. Or if I write in a cafe, I take a tote of them, and books I love, books I admire, voices I like, and I will read the first few sentences of the first page of one book and then put it down, pick up another, read up this, and it gets you in the mindset of appreciating someone else's voice, but it also kind of kickstarts your own in a weird way. It kind of really helps. So I think in the moment of picking up, of writing to find your voice in the moment, I think doing that is really helpful. But in the long term of growing and finding that, I think it's just analyzing voices you admire in authors that you read and inspire you, and analyzing the visual text of why. What is it? Is it their short sentences? Is it their flair? Is it the introspection of a character? Is it the differences between the characters? Is it, I think analyzing it on that level of other people you admire, and then it helps, it kind of subconsciously helps you find your own, and you write what inspires you.
No, I think that's really true, and it's we should all be reading like writers, should we? We should all be reading to see not how to copy a style, but what works. I mean, I'm a big fan of Greg Hurwitz and the Orphan X series, and I one thing that strikes me about that is that there's not a wasted word in those books. Every single word is pulling its weight, and I kind of have this sort of mantra now that every word in every sentence, in every paragraph, in every scene, in every chapter, and must drive the book forward. And that's, I've kind of developed that from being a big fan of Greg's books, because I don't like flabby reads. I don't like I love descriptive. I love to be able to picture a scene or understand a mood or a person, something like that. But every word must do it for me, and that sort of that sort of thing that you're talking about there is what kind of sort of honed me really towards what my writing style is, which I think is nothing like Greg's, nowhere near as good as Greg's, but it is it is that kind of that economy of words, so that you get the very best out of every word, every sentence.
And also, I think it was really interesting that you said that on the areas that you don't like. I think it's equally important to read books you don't like, to discover why, so you can avoid that pitfall yourself. And also, what we don't like in one book, someone else will adore. So it's always down to personal taste. But yeah, I think analyzing text and actually for what it is, not just the story and getting swept up as a reader, but analysing sentence by sentence why we like it, why we don't. And also, actually, I think when I wanted to elevate my work, I looked at writers I admired and then my own. I thought, okay, there's a better than mine. Why? And I would read and I would look at their strength and be like, oh, okay, in my own writing, I'm not there yet, or this or that. And I think that analytical view of it speeds up the process in terms of elevation. And hopefully every book gets better.
Yeah, and I think it's the practice as well. I mean, I did the author spotlight last week, which Lucy was kind enough to do, and I mentioned them there that, you know, well, I'll say his name because he's a good friend of mine and co-author, Peter James. We were talking about something. He said, "Well, how's your writing going?" "Oh, I'm a bit off the boil at the moment. I haven't written for a few days." And then he said, "You have got to write every day. You've got to get in the rhythm. You've got to keep the muscle flexed." And that's exactly, you know, what once you found that style, it's easier if you're doing it regularly and you can just click into it, you know, rather than, you know, if you leave it a week, sometimes it's hard just to go, oh, you know, how should I say that? But the more, it's same with anything, you know, if you're a musician or a sports person or whatever, the more you do something, you know, the more natural it comes. It's the same with writing.
So I would just love to say quickly, I think we've only got 2 minutes left, but what I would love to say is, Graham, will you pitch the book that you want everyone to buy, and then I'll follow suit?
My book or your book?
Yeah, no, yours. Yeah, no, not mine. Tell me which book of mine you like that they have to buy. No, what books should they be buying?
I would like, because it's now, I would like everyone to buy Force of Hate. So Force of Hate is out in paperback on the 21st of September, and it is it tells the story, as we said, of when right-wing extremism takes over a city and the neo-Nazi council use human slaves, human trafficking, modern slavery and euthanasia to fund a huge terrorist atrocity, and what Joe can do to stop that.
Poor Joe, no pressure.
No pressure. What about yours?
So mine is Conviction. So Conviction is the story of defence barrister Neve Harper, who has just landed the trial of her career, defending a man accused of killing his family, but protests of his innocence. However, leading up to the trial, she is approached by a man on the tube who reveals a secret from her past and makes her choose. Either she must throw the trial and send her client to prison, or her own criminal past will be exposed. And that is currently out in hardback, ebook, and audiobook, and it will be out in paperback spring next year.
And it's amazing. It's incredible. And Samantha's reminding us, where can we see you next live, Jack? Apart from the coffee shops of Hove, actually.
Yeah. I should be way. I'm at Capital Crime, which would be fantastic. I'm there on the Thursday, and I'm doing a fantastic panel with. Oh my goodness, my memory's really bad, but I think I'm going to nail it. No, I'm not. But with some fantastic people on the panel. And so, yeah, Capital Crime. And then I'm at Yeovil Festival as well. And I don't know if I have any online things left yet, actually. But then there'll be lots next year as well.
Brilliant. Okay. And I'm at Capital Crime. I'm doing a panel on the Friday called, what's it called? It's called Unlikely Detectives, which is a bit of an insult because I was a detective. But it then says real life sleuth versus amateur sleuth. So we've got a great panel there. And then I'm at Bloody Scotland as well, doing a panel on Travellers with Tina Baker, William Hussey and Craig Sisterton chairing us. So that'd be great.
You've just put me to shame by remembering everyone's names. What was I going to say? Have you been to Bloody Scotland before?
I haven't.
You're going to love it. The torch procession is phenomenal.
Yeah. And I think I've been roped into the English v Scottish football writers, crime writers football.
Very nice.
I told my son about that today, and he's a very high level referee, and he says, "You've got no chance, Dad. You've got no chance." So, you know.
Well, don't worry. I think usually people have been drinking and smoking the night before, so they're going to be worse for wear. So if you just keep on the water, you'll beat them.
I won't be smoking, but I might have the edge on them.
See, so I think everyone's going to not be at 100%. So I think you'll smash it.
Brilliant. I think we're going to get thrown off in a minute. So Jack, thanks ever so much. It's been such fun. It's been great, and you know, I can't wait to see you. I might be the one giving you a call tomorrow for that coffee shop meeting. Going, this business mind you're talking about.
I love it. No, we'll definitely do that. We'll talk off air and get that sorted. But no, thank you so much for
thanks everyone for your questions, and thanks, Sam, and all the administrators for not only putting on today, but also the fabulous club that you put so much time into. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Bye.